Good morning and welcome to the Eversync webinar. Our topic today is can and should you use cloud as part of your data protection strategy? I'm the presenter. My name is Joan Rabbits and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Eversync. Right now, everyone will be in listen-only mode, but if you have any questions, please type them into the question area and I'll try to answer them either as I go, or if I don't answer them as part of the presentation, I'll try to answer questions at the end. So our agenda today is I'd like to talk about some of the benefits and challenges of incorporating cloud into your data protection strategy. And then we'll look at some different cloud architectures that might be deployed for data protection and how they differ. And we'll look at some additional factors that you should consider when deciding when and how to move to the cloud for data protection. And then we'll talk briefly at the end about Eversync's cloud tiered data protection architecture. So the cloud has tremendous potential for data protection. It could address many critical problems, especially for the mid-market companies who have issues with their backup and disaster recovery plans. I think one of the most important things that the cloud can bring to a mid-market company in their data protection strategy is to, for the first time, have a real disaster recovery site. And this can really tremendously improve disaster recovery readiness. But the cloud can also play a role in meeting long-term retention requirements, especially for companies that are basically trying to meet those requirements today by keeping backups for a longer period of time. And as a result, it can help eliminate tape and the burdens of managing tape. And of course, cloud has been advertised in general, and especially this will be true for data protection, in its ability to really shift your IT administrative costs from your site into the cloud vendor's site and make them responsible for more of those costs. Also can allow companies to shift from capital equipment costs to operating costs, which can play a big role. And of course, as with cloud, it can provide pay-as-you-grow flexibility with the prospect of not having to purchase in advance and provision storage in advance for data protection. But one of the more important things about cloud that I think people will start to realize when they start to deploy cloud-based solutions is that it also can provide them anytime, anywhere access to their protected data in a way that's not really available today, and give them the additional abilities to look at that data, including searching it, accessing it more granularly, and restoring it easily. So we'll talk a little bit more about how all of these are possible. So it's no surprise that adoption of cloud-based technologies for storage is very high in the mid-market. Whereas enterprises are a little slow to adopt cloud, especially public cloud, the mid-market is adopting cloud at 2 to 3 times the rate of the rest of the market. And that's because they don't have some of the issues of having large data center investments that an enterprise would have, but definitely have enterprise class data protection requirements. So it's expected that data protection will eventually become a feature everyone expects to get as part of cloud services. And so when mid-sized companies are asked when and how they're planning to use public cloud storage, the number one thing that they're planning to move in the next 2 years to public cloud is backup, disaster recovery, and some form of archiving, which is no surprise. So let's look at some of the different options for incorporating cloud into your data protection strategy. And I'm going to talk about sort of a path of 4 or 5 different approaches that build on one another. So the simplest approach is to back your data up directly to the cloud. In other words, move the whole backup problem as much as possible to the cloud. In this scenario, a customer would put some backup software on every one of the servers that they're planning to back up, which here I'm calling clients. And each of those servers would go directly over the internet to the cloud and push that server's data into the cloud. And there's 2 variations of this. One is to have that software that runs on every server back the data up. And another option is to have that software basically create a snapshot of that server's data in the cloud. It's a very simple strategy, and there are this is exactly what you would deploy if you're doing backup at home, for example. So there's kind of a fundamental barrier that makes that particular strategy a problem for mid-market companies, where it's not really a problem for me to do at home. And so I wanted to stop and talk about that for a second. And the issue is the ratio between the amount of data that you need to protect or push to the cloud and the amount of bandwidth that you have to do it with. So I'm looking at, in this graph on the x-axis, three different scenarios: home office, small office, or you and me at home. In the middle, I'm looking at a mid-market customer, and on the right side, we're looking at enterprise. So my at home, for example, I'm backing up a couple terabytes of data, but it's a movie database. My backup software that I use at home goes directly to the cloud. It took about 3 months to back that up the first time. Of course, it's never going to change, so I wasn't too upset about that. And I have at home Comcast, enhanced Comcast networking services to the internet. So now let's look at a typical mid-market company. That company may have anywhere from 2 to 50 or 100 terabytes of data that needs to be protected. But from a network perspective, although they have a fast network internally, they typically will have some kind of enhanced business Comcast or DSL or similar network to the internet. In other words, the network to the internet is only slightly better than home, but the amount of data could be 10 or 100 times as much data. Now let's go to the enterprise, where they clearly have huge amounts of data, anywhere from 100 terabytes to a petabyte of data. However, in the enterprise, we're looking at very high bandwidth to the internet. Most enterprises have dedicated dark fiber. They have 10 gigabits or 1 gigabit to the internet dedicated. They have the ability to manage those kind of direct connections, and they have the money for it. So actually, even though they have a lot more data, the amount of time it takes them to transfer that data, which is the green triangle in the back, is actually not very high. So what really matters is how long would it take you to transfer the data you actually have to back up over the network that you have available. For a home consumer, it's not so bad. Their requirements aren't that high, and although it could take up to 30 days to transfer the data, it's usually not an issue. In the enterprise, again, because of high bandwidth, it doesn't take a long time to transfer data. But in the mid-market, there's a big problem. For the amount of data that a typical mid-sized company has relative to the bandwidth they have to the internet, it's simply not feasible to directly back that data up to the cloud in most cases. And this means not only backing up the first time, but backing up incremental changes. Because again, we have many more incremental changes than I might have at home. So this creates a significant barrier and forces most companies that are bigger than a small office to look for something a little better than backing up directly to the cloud. So again, just looking at the capabilities, in order for a mid-sized company with anywhere from 2 to 10 to 50 terabytes of data, that data is going to have to be reduced somehow in order to get it to the cloud in any kind of reasonable amount of time. And that data reduction can come in the form of either bandwidth optimization or deduplication, and usually both. So in order to do those kinds of functions, and on top of that, we want to encrypt the data. In order to do those kind of functions, there needs to be a little bit more what I would call heavy lifting on site before that data can be pushed to the cloud. It's got to be reduced, it's got to be optimized, it's got to be encrypted. So generally speaking, from every server pushing data to the cloud would put that heavy lifting burden on every one of the servers in your environment. So probably not the best choice. Also, what we find for mid-sized companies that have more data is that maybe not all of that data should safely go to the cloud, especially on day one. Many of our mid-sized customers tell us that they have compliance requirements for some of their data that the cloud may not meet today. And so they don't necessarily want to be pushing 100% of their data to the cloud. Another issue with all the solutions, but especially solutions that don't have any kind of middle ground, is that you're pushing your data directly from your servers into the cloud. So questions customers ask is, what if I want to disconnect from that cloud? What if I want to move to another cloud? Do I have a place I can pull my data back to? Well, if you push your data directly to the cloud, that might be a problem for you because you have no place to bring it back to, because you obviously you don't want to restore old data to a new server just because you're trying to disconnect from the cloud. So those are questions customers ask. And then finally, does it meet your disaster recovery needs? Are you going to be able to back your data up and restore it in a reasonable amount of time? Or can you back up frequently enough to meet your restore point objectives? So this drives customers to look for maybe a more sophisticated solution. And the first most obvious one would be, well, let's put a gateway between my clients and the internet. And that gateway can create a buffer. And that buffer can be used to make it look like my backup speed is faster, even though the internet is slow. It also could allow me to restore some things faster by caching. So usually we would put a gateway, a cloud gateway in place, and that cloud gateway would have some capability for caching. And it may also do things like encrypt the data. So that sounds like a good choice. So let's look at the pros and cons specifically for data protection. Well, you definitely would get improved backup speed because even though the data isn't out to the cloud yet, you've backed it up and the gateway is holding it. So as far as you're concerned, the data's backed up. It's not all the way there, but you can move on. You also could get improved restore time. If your data is sitting in cache, obviously your restore is going to be very quick. This gateway can provide things like bandwidth optimization and encryption, all of which are important features when going to the cloud. And a really nice thing about a gateway and a cache is that it can be slipped in transparently. So your existing backup could stay the same. At least on the surface, it appears you could keep your existing backup environment with little or no change, which could be very non-disruptive. So, of course, it's not a panacea. One of the potential issues is that you will actually need to integrate with your backup software. And the reason is because most backup software is going to have some overlapping features that are also provided on the gateway, things like encryption, possibly deduplication. And those things have to be done in the right order. So, for example, you wouldn't want to have your backup software encrypting your data and then your gateway attempting to deduplicate after it's been encrypted, because you would negate the value of deduplication. So there does actually need to be a little bit of integration between your software and the gateway to make sure that they don't step on each other. A lot of gateways don't actually do data reduction. So they typically will do bandwidth optimization and encryption, but not necessarily deduplicate. So that's something you'd want to look for. But the most important limitation of a gateway with a cache is that the idea that the cache might allow you to do quick restores sounds good, but it's actually very difficult to achieve, because with backup, if you want to restore from a backup, you need to have the whole backup job so you can restore it. And the cache isn't necessarily going to keep a whole backup job. So the challenge is going to be making sure that you've sized your cache so that at least one of your relevant backups, whether it's your last full or your last, well, it has to be your last full or synthetic full backup, has to be in cache. And unfortunately, you don't know ahead of time what size that's going to be, and it's changing over time. So that can create a challenge where you might want to have to keep a much bigger cache in your gateway than you might otherwise like to keep, because it's very difficult to know whether you actually have enough data to do a restore. This is very different than having a cache for primary storage, where any bit of data that you could access that's in cache is valuable. It's not the same with backup and DR. And then, of course, this solution isn't going to do anything to address compliance or retention requirements, not going to allow you to distinguish some data local and some data in the cloud. And because it's only a cache, does not address some issues of cloud lock-in, because it's not a place that you can recover all of your data to if you want to disconnect from a cloud or move to a new cloud. It's really just a cache. So what could we do beyond that? Oops, sorry. So I could go a little further and I could implement a solution that's a hybrid backup cloud solution. And a hybrid solution means that there's some backup service on premise and there's some backup service in the cloud. And this usually involves, instead of putting in a generic gateway, actually putting in a backup server or appliance that sits between your clients, your servers, and the cloud. And that backup server actually is a little smarter than caching. It will keep some number of your full and incremental backups locally and then over time, push them to the cloud. And also, most mid-market backup solutions also have some capability to vault or archive data for archive purposes. But for the most part, the focus of hybrid solutions today is around disaster recovery. In other words, we're going to take some of your backup jobs and keep a copy in the cloud so that if I have a total failure of my site, I can actually recover, or I lose my entire backup server, that I can recover at least some amount of data, maybe my last full and incrementals or last two full and incrementals from the copy that's in the cloud. And an add-on to that, which makes it even more valuable, is to add the capability to restore and run in the cloud during a disaster. In other words, I've got a copy of my backups, some of my backups in the cloud. If I actually lose my entire site, I could actually restore in the cloud from that backup, restore some of my quote unquote my clients, and run them as virtualized applications in the cloud. This would usually be done for a limited period of time, but it is the first point at which you could now say that even if you don't have a second site, you have a second site for DR, because the cloud can act as a full second site. So that's very promising. So let's look at some of the pros and cons. Well, of course, I'm going to have both improved backup and improved restore speed. I'm going to be able to do things like restore an entire server that failed, restore the server image very rapidly as if everything was local, because I'll usually have a local copy of my most recent backups. The solution can provide things like bandwidth optimization, deduplication, which is essential, encryption, and can actually be in charge of determining how much data is kept locally versus in the cloud, and be much more effective than a cache. Also, because you've got a full backup server there, you can actually disconnect from the cloud. You could pull all your data back, assuming your local backup server is big enough, or you could pull enough data back as far as you can support locally, disconnect from the cloud, and then move to another cloud if you wanted to. So this provides a much higher level of control than any of the solutions I've described before. Whoops. So looking at solutions for hybrid backup today, the con of a solution like this, of course, is that this is a backup server. So it needs to be supported as part of an integrated backup solution, and may require that you replace some of your existing backup software, because it's going to be a complete backup solution that includes both the on-premise and the cloud component. And most of the hybrid solutions today provide a good DR solution. You have a DR copy of your data, but doesn't necessarily address compliance requirements. And those compliance requirements include both the need to retain data for a much longer period of time and the requirement to potentially put some compliance data in the cloud, but not all. And a solution that's just basically keeping a DR copy in the cloud is not necessarily going to optimize the placement of backup between your local site, your on-premise, and your cloud services. So now let's look at sort of an evolved hybrid cloud solution, and we're calling this cloud tiered data protection. And this is the type of solution that Eversync is providing. So what's different? Well, your clients still go to a backup appliance that's local on premise, and that backup appliance could be a physical appliance or virtual appliance. That virtual appliance keeps short-term backup retention, maybe your last month of fulls and incrementals, and then is tiering the rest of your older backups out to the cloud for as long as you want to keep backups. Also make sure that you have a full copy of backups for DR purposes, and gives the ability to restore and run out of that DR copy in the cloud during a disaster for a limited period of time. But finally, it also allows you to tier your archive data and keep archive data in the cloud to meet your retention and security requirements, but also allows you with very simple policy to keep some data in a local archive, especially if you don't feel that that data can be securely kept in the cloud. The best example that we hear from customers is, for example, one of our customers is using our product in the police department, and some of their police department data is subject to Homeland Security, Department of Justice, and Patriot Act requirements. They don't feel that that particular data should go in the cloud today, but the rest of their data, they feel like they could archive it for the long term in the cloud. So they want the ability to have control that that data that is specific to certain compliance requirements is always kept local and never tiered to the cloud. So of course, we have the same benefits of any hybrid solution. You have improved backup and restore speed, the ability to do bandwidth optimization, deduplication to reduce the amount of data that has to be stored and moved to the cloud, encryption, that it also can easily determine how much data and how much compliance data you want to keep locally or in the cloud based on very simple policies. A solution like this allows for easy disconnection from the cloud or movement to a different cloud, because you do have the ability to pull all of your data back to your on-premise appliance and operate that way, either permanently or for some limited period of time. And of course, restore and run capability allows the cloud to really act as your DR site for a limited period of time, while also addressing your compliance requirements for both local data and long-term retention. And it has the same disadvantage of hybrid solutions, that it does need to be part of an integrated backup solution. You wouldn't necessarily use this in addition to existing backup software. It would typically replace it, because integration with the cloud is part of the total solution. Now, of course, there are other considerations I haven't talked about. In all of the models I described, other considerations include, does your data, when it goes to the cloud, does it go to a public cloud or a private cloud? And there are trade-offs with those in terms, because really the cloud is what's providing the underlying reliability and high availability part of the solution, and the cloud is also providing the compliance and security guarantees. So the choice of what provider is being used for the public or private cloud is an important choice to look at from those perspectives. And in almost all of the hybrid solutions, the provider of the backup solution is the provider of the cloud solution. They may not be the creator of it, but typically it's integrated in the offering. So it's worth looking at what option do I have for cloud, and is it going to meet my security requirements and my compliance requirements and my high availability and reliability requirements. And that's part of the SLA that's provided by the vendor. Another consideration for every customer is what is your bandwidth? What are your bandwidth limitations? That ratio of bandwidth to data is really critical. And for sites that have high bandwidth, you have more options in terms of what solution that you go with than a site that has weak bandwidth. Another consideration is how much access do you need to your data? When a provider is putting your data in the cloud, how much access are they going to give you to that data? Can you go directly to it? Is it in a format that you can access and look at? Can you do granular restores without restoring back to your local site? Those are good questions to ask in any of these solutions. Also, control over where the data resides. I talked in each of the options about ability to pull your data back from the cloud, but also control of what data goes to the cloud. Does all of your data have to go, or can you have some control over which archive data is kept locally and which archive data goes into the cloud, over how much of your backup is local and how much goes into the cloud, that kind of thing. Those control issues are important, and they tend to be features of the products. And then finally, can the solution meet your security and privacy requirements? And that comes from two components. One, the underlying cloud itself provides certain security and privacy capabilities. So for example, if I'm going to the Amazon cloud, I know what kind of compliance certificates Amazon has. I know what kind of security they provide that's published, but also what kind of encryption is being employed. And that's often done from the on-premise part of the solution. And then in the cloud, it's a multi-tenant solution typically. So what kind of solution is the backup provider implementing in their cloud services to ensure that your data is protected in a multi-tenant environment? So to summarize some of the trade-offs, just in terms of your requirements, I think two of the key trade-offs are your data to bandwidth ratio. How much data do you have relative to your bandwidth capability? And then on the x-axis, what are your recovery time and recovery point objectives? So if you have low recovery time objectives, you can wait a few days to get your data, and you have really, really poor bandwidth, or you have relatively low data relative to your bandwidth, then backing up directly to the cloud is a good option. If your data is higher relative to your bandwidth, so if you've got more data and you've got more stringent requirements for how long it can take to back up and how long it can take to recover that data, then you can move to a cache or hybrid solution. If you have recovery point objectives, then a cache solution is risky because there's no guarantee with the cache that you'll actually be able to recover unless your cache has been very properly sized and tuned. Whereas a hybrid cloud solution gives you a much better guarantee of recovery time and recovery point objectives and can handle more data. And then if you really need to push a lot of data, you have very stringent recovery time and recovery point objectives, you need granular restores, and you have a lot of data, you need to be looking at a more complete solution that's going to be able to tier all of your data to the cloud under your control. And that would be something like a cloud tiered solution. So just a very quick overview of Eversync. So Eversync is developing a cloud tiered data protection solution. As I described, all components of data protection are tiered to the cloud, including your some of your backup retention. So you have the option to keep some some of your full and incremental backups locally, and the remainder in the cloud. There's a DR capability and the ability to tier archive from your local site to the cloud under your control. Our solution is built on the Amazon public cloud initially, and we'll be offering options for other public clouds afterwards. We found that Amazon provided the best reliability and availability and compliance certificates of any of the cloud providers at the most effective price point. In our solution, we provide direct access to all of the data from a single portal into the cloud services. In other words, you can seamlessly view all of your data, regardless of whether it's located on your appliance or in the cloud. And you can go directly from your device into any of the cloud data, do granular restores, go down into a virtual machine inside of a backup job, into the Exchange server that's running inside of that virtual machine, and pull out individual emails, all while accessing the data directly in the cloud without having to do any local restore. So that's very beneficial in preventing a lot of excess data movement. And finally, because we believe that archive is an important component of a data protection strategy, we're going to develop options to pull SaaS application data into the cloud archive, the long-term archive. Of course, applications like Google and Salesforce and Dropbox provide backup and disaster recovery and availability solutions as part of the SaaS solution. So you don't necessarily need to back that data up. But there are some of our customers who do want to have one authoritative copy of their data, especially for long-term archive purposes and for retention. And so they want to be able to pull the data from those SaaS applications and keep it in their archive, which will also give them the ability to search and access all their data, whether it came from their local site or from one of their SaaS applications, and also do simple analytics on that data. And of course, we provide business continuity tools for restore and run in the cloud during a disaster. Eversync has always been in the business of providing integrated solutions for backup, disaster recovery, and archive. And our on-premise solutions range from our virtual backup appliance, which can be deployed in a VMware environment on existing physical resources for up to 20 terabytes of backup. And then we have a very scalable range of physical appliances that range from 2 to 132 terabytes of storage for on-premise storage for backup. And those are all integrated with cloud services that seamlessly tier the data between the on-premise appliance and the cloud. And our solutions basically have some very common characteristics. They're very simple and easy to use. It's a turnkey solution. Our solution for our hybrid cloud solution or cloud tiered solution encompasses all the components, including the on-premise components, the data movement to the cloud, and all the cloud services and cloud storage in a single easy subscription that's relatively fixed. There's no per client fees, there's no add-on costs. It's true of our products that all of the agents for all the servers are basically included in the product. Replication is an included feature. So there's really no sort of add-on features to worry about. And we're planning to provide a single point of access for both cloud and on-premise data so that it's not something you even need to be concerned about whether the data is still sitting locally or whether it's in the cloud when you're going to access the data, when you're going to do granular restores. We incorporate all the backup, replication, and archiving features in a single solution with a single point of control. And of course, our backup solutions are designed for mid-market. So they're optimized for virtualization. We're highly integrated with VMware and Hyper-V. We are application aware for Microsoft applications like Exchange, SQL Server, and SharePoint. And we automatically will be tiering the data between the on-premise appliance and the cloud based on very simple policies that the customer sets. Eversync is many customers. We have over 500 customers in a variety of verticals. Our customers are school districts, city governments, credit unions, healthcare clinics, small hospitals, financial institutions, and manufacturing facilities across a wide range of use cases. And we have case studies on our website for many of our customers describing how they're using our products. So for more information or next steps, I would encourage you to contact our sales organization or go to our website and check out, we have other webinars on a variety of topics. You can sign up for a weekly demo, either live or you can view a recorded demonstration of the product on our website. And also for more resources about cloud data tiering, there's a special section on our website indicated here where we have a white paper on our architecture as well as some other resources. Okay, I'm going to leave a moment for questions. I don't see any questions yet. Okay, well, thank you very much for participating. And again, if you have any other questions, please reach out and contact us. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.